Welcome back. In this session, we are going to understand Docker architecture. This is very important session of this section as once you start building Docker image, start running Docker container, and if something didn't work, then you should know where to go and debug it. Which component of Docker is not working? Because of that, this section is sorry because of that this lecture is very important. Now let's go ahead and understand Docker architecture. So Docker follow client server model where different components work together to manage containers. So you see here we have Docker client, Docker host, and Docker registry, and all these three components work together to run a container. Now let's start with Docker client. So Docker client is where as a user we interact with Docker. So if you want to do anything with the Docker, either creating the image, running a container, then we need to interact with the Docker, right? Docker host. So how do we do that? For that we need a CLI, and that's where this Docker CLI, Docker clients, come into the picture. Now think of it as a remote control for the Docker. So if you want to do anything, so you will be using this Docker client, this Docker CLI. So this is remote control. Now let's understand this with the example. So let's say if you want to build the image, how do you build the image? Well, we know you can go ahead and write the Docker specification, container specification in a Docker file, right? Then you need to run a command. How do you run a command? For that you need a Docker CLI. Docker CLI, then you will use the command called build, then you can pass this specification to build the image. Now take another example. Let's say using this Docker build CLI, you build the image. Now you want to run a container from this image. Then again we need to use another Docker CLI, that's called Docker run. So using the image, it will go ahead and create the container for us. Now other command you see here, Docker pull. So sometime when you need to use a image that's created by someone else, then you can use Docker pull. Now you must be thinking, where is this image is? So that's where this component come into the picture. So there is a component called Docker Registry where we can host and share our image. So imagine if you have created a image and that image you want to share with your colleague or maybe friend. How do you share? So you can share your image using Docker Registry. So Docker Registry is the online platform where we can store our image and share with our colleague and friend. So now think like Docker Registry is a app store for Docker image. Yes, there we can store our images. Now let me show you this. So this is the, as I said, online platform. Here hub.docker.com and a repository, and here you see, here this is my username because I have logged in here. So here you can go ahead and search the different image. So let's say if you want to find nginx image, you can go ahead and search nginx. Okay, sorry, let me type it, nginx, and hit the enter. Now you see we have different nginx images available, and you can go ahead and use any of this image. How you can use it? You see a command called docker pull nginx. When you go and I run this command, so it will go and pull image from this Docker hub, Docker registry. Okay, and again if you go here, you will see I have already some images here. You see my React application, Node application, API, and UI. So you can also push your images to the Docker registry using Docker push command. docker push command. Now we understood client, we understood registry. Now we have the most important component of Docker architecture is Docker host. So Docker host is the actual machine. It could be local or could be remote where Docker engine runs and container get created. Yes, and all this happen with help of Docker Daemon. So Docker Daemon is the brain of the Docker. Yes, so Docker Daemon is the brain of the Docker that control everything on this Docker host. Whether we are building the images or creating the container, everything is done by Docker daemon, and Docker daemon is called Docker D. Yes, so Docker D is the Docker engine, that's Docker daemon that do all this heavy lifting. Now let's quickly understand what are the different tasks can be done by this Docker daemon or Docker D. We already understood one of them is building the image. So as a client, when we run this command docker build, then we pass our specification, then this request goes to the Docker daemon, and Docker daemon create the image, let's say Ubuntu. So this create the image, and this image is stored on the local machine. And if you want, we can push this image also to the Docker registry using a command called docker push. One important thing, these images what you see here, these images are immutable snapshot. Okay, so these are read only, we cannot modify it. So if you want to modify it, then go ahead, you can do changes in your Docker specification Docker file, then again build the image, then this image will get updated. Okay, but this image itself you cannot change it. Now next major task of this Docker daemon is running the container, creating the container. So Docker daemon creates the container and manage the containers. So when we run command called docker run, and then we pass the image, then using the image it's go ahead and create our containers. And when it's create the container, then it's use host OS kernel, and also it's isolate this container completely from the other containers using namespace and cgroup. Yes, so using this it makes sure our container is isolated. So this is the architecture and overview of the Docker. So what we understood here, we understood there is a three component of the Docker architecture. One is the CLI. So using this CLI, we interact with the Docker host, and Docker host has the Docker daemon, and this is brain of the Docker, and this is called Docker engine as well. And when we send any command, anything, so basically this interacts with the Docker daemon, and Docker daemon do everything. Whether we need to create the image, we need to create the run the container, start the container, stop the container, remove the container. So everything is done by Docker daemon and Docker D. Then we can store our images in Docker registry, and you can also use third party images as well, so we can store and share our images. So that's pretty much I wanted to cover in this session. In next session we are going to install Docker, and we are going to do hands-on. Thank you so much, see you in the next session.